Jung wrote, "For the extrovert the object is interesting and attractive a priori, as is the subject or psychic reality, for the introvert. Sensing extroverts are people of the body. Thinking introverts are people of the mind. Sensing extroverts are always drawn to the synthetic a posteriori, and thinking introverts to the analytic a priori. They have opposite worldviews. Extroverts are fascinated by external objects. Introverts are drawn to internal subjectivity." Jung wrote, "We could therefore use the expression noumenal accent. Noumenal refers to something that touches us deeply, and even divinely, from the Latin numen, associated with divinity, for this fact, by which I mean that for the extrovert the quality of positive significance and value attaches primarily to the object, so that it plays the predominant, determining, and decisive role in all psychic processes from the start, just as the subject does for the introvert. Materialists are highly influenced by objects, things and bodies, and are dismissive of mind. Idealists are highly influenced by minds and see the senses as deceptive. Materialists are object-oriented while idealists are subject-oriented. The materialist wants to know what he is looking at. The idealist wants to know what is doing the looking and having the experience of looking. Science literally has no interest in the subject, in the agent in which consciousness and knowledge reside. They always assign knowledge and even consciousness to external objects. Jung wrote, "But the noumenal accent does not decide only between subject and object, it also selects the conscious function of which the individual makes the principal use. The central problem of the human race is that the four basic different psychological types, which is to say feeling types, sensing types, intuitive types and thinking types, have wholly different ideas of what the numinous, the sacred, is. Feeling types regard their feelings as numinous and believe them implicitly. Love and light feeling types literally believe that reality is made of love, that love is the meaning, purpose and point of existence, that absolute, unconditional love exists and that they can be absorbed by it and personally experience perfect love. This is their supreme goal and desire. They can't imagine that anything else can be true or important. Sensing types regard things, matter, objects, observables, as numinous and can attach no significance at all to anything unobservable. They dismiss such things as fantasy, unreality, abstraction and nonsense. Intuitives regard their subjective epiphanies, their personal visions, their glimpses of the transcendent, as numinous, and they will never agree with anything that contradicts their intense individual moments of enlightenment, which they achieve via meditation, mindfulness, psychedelic drugs, sensory deprivation, fasting, and so on. Thinking types locate the numinous in analytic precision, in the certain, the perfect, the absolute, the infallible, the immutable, the incontestable, the irrefutable, the complete and consistent, the coherent, the whole, the complete. Therefore, is it any wonder that humanity has been subjected to drastically different accounts of what the truth is? All wars, curiously enough, are actually rooted in personality types and what they treat as numinous, i.e., meaningful and sacred, as opposed to meaningless and profane. Why is it so hard to persuade people of the truth? It's because if you're stating something that conflicts with what they regard as numinous, then they think you're crazy, a liar, a fantasist, a crank, or a dangerous maniac who needs to be stopped. What you'll discover in life is that the people who agree with you about truth are basically members of your same personality type. Which means that everything reduces to a numbers game. Humanity's truths exactly reflect how many of each personality type there are. All convinced Abrahamists and love and lighters are feeling types, alienated from sensing, intuition and thinking. All convinced scientists are sensing types, alienated from intuition, feeling and thinking. All convinced followers of Eastern religion and mysticism are intuitives, alienated from sensing, feeling and thinking. All rationalists are thinking types, who are drawn to mathematics and philosophy and can't take seriously anything based on faith, emotion, the senses, or mysticism. Humanity will never unite behind a single truth unless all of humanity becomes a single personality type, or one type forces its truth on the rest and they all eventually come to accept it, despite themselves. Ultimately, everyone will become a thinking intuitive, because that's the optimal way to connect to ultimate reality. The senses and feelings will never take you there. This, after all, is a self-solving mathematical reality. It's engaged in an inherently intellectual exercise. Jung wrote, "Sensation and intuition I call irrational functions, because they are both concerned simply with what happens and with actual or potential realities." Thinking and feeling, being discriminative functions, are rational. Sensation, the fonction du réel, rules out any simultaneous intuitive activity, since the latter is not concerned with the present but is rather a sixth sense for hidden possibilities, and therefore should not allow itself to be unduly influenced by existing reality. The method of science prevents scientists from having any regard for intuition, the non-local, the paranormal. These things are excluded from science's method, paradigm and ideology. Jung wrote, "In the same way, thinking is opposed to feeling, because thinking should not be influenced or deflected from its purpose by feeling values, just as feeling is usually vitiated by too much reflection. Thinking makes feeling types ill, hence why Abrahamism and love and light are so moronic and proceed purely by way of emotional assertion. God is unconditional love, God loves you, love is all, love your enemy, spread the love, all you need is love, and so on." Thinking types do not make any reference at all to emotion in their rational and logical arguments. Thinking types are Vulcans, while feeling types are humans. Jung wrote, "The functions which are not rational, not logical, and not discriminating or evaluating, are sensation and intuition. These two are by their very nature opposed to the rational functions. Science and mysticism, faith and feelings, are all opposed to rationalism. They all agree that reason is the devil's whore." Jung wrote, "When we think, it is in order to judge or reach a conclusion, and when we feel it is in order to attach a proper value to something." Thinking types are obsessed with conclusions, which means of course that they want the final answer to everything, the conclusion to everything. They want absolute certainty because nothing else would constitute a conclusion. Doubt would remain. Matters would remain open. No other type is concerned with certainty and conclusions. Scientists actually talk about their devotion to uncertainty. Populist physicist Brian Cox said, "I don't need an answer. I don't need answers to everything, I'm comfortable with the unknown, so I think if you're not comfortable with the unknown, then it's difficult to be a scientist." In science, there are no universal truths, just views of the world that have yet to be shown to be false. The celebration of uncertainty should underpin every science. No thinking type would ever be caught dead saying such things. They are anathema to rationalists and logicians, and vividly demonstrate how much scientists are opposed to reason and logic and an analytic, closed, intelligible solution to existence. Cox is one of science's most vocal philosophy haters. He is a classic anti-intellectual. He spends his career gawping at the night sky, and expressing his wonder, like some ancient astrologer. Jung wrote, "Sensation and intuition, on the other hand, are perceptive functions. They make us aware of what is happening, but do not interpret or evaluate it. They do not proceed selectively, according to principles, but are simply receptive to what happens. But what happens is essentially irrational. Irrationality is a vice where thinking and feeling are called for. Rationality is a vice where sensation and intuition should be trusted. Never forget that observing the world does not and cannot interpret it, evaluate it, or explain it. Observation in and of itself is a non-explanatory undertaking. Science is apparently wholly ignorant of this fact. It's only when non-scientific, non-observational conceptualism is applied to science that it becomes powerful. Specifically, it's only when science applies mathematics, a rationalist subject which contradicts empiricist science, that science makes any sense. As a matter of fact, if you removed mathematics from science, science would become nonsense, so how can anyone argue that anything other than mathematics is the true, powerful, real aspect of science, while all the rest is man-made abstraction and nonsense? Science believes the exact opposite, that it is mathematics that is an unreal, man-made abstraction. Science is a subject that cannot even explain itself, never mind explain reality. When will any scientist explain why science uses mathematics, a subject which in every way repudiates the scientific method and paradigm? They don't offer Nobel Prizes for explaining things like that. No one goes there. The coherence of science is avoided like the plague. Science is nothing but a practical, instrumental subject that models the observable world using heuristic techniques. It doesn't set out to be complete, consistent and coherent, and it isn't. No scientist is interested in any of that. It's dismissed as mere philosophy. Scientists are perceiving types, irrational types in Jungian terms. That means they lack judgment, they lack rationalism. That's the defining problem of science. Science is a pseudo-rationalism. It smuggles rationalism into science via mathematics. When you remove mathematics, you revert to irrational alchemy, science's predecessor. How did Jung define intuition? He wrote, "Intuition, Latin intuere, to look at or into. I regard intuition as a basic psychological function. It is the function that mediates perceptions in an unconscious way. So, in these terms, the physical senses mediate perception consciously, and intuition unconsciously. The physical senses concern the local, unentangled environment while intuition deals with the non-local, entangled environment. The whole problem with science is that it refuses to engage with intuition, and the mysterious world addressed by intuition. That is the paranormal world, the supernatural world, the metaphysical world, the world beyond the senses, hence beyond science, hence the world that science doesn't believe exists. Science believes in the grand old fallacy that absence of evidence is evidence of absence, when in fact it's simply evidence that your sensory model does not accommodate all of reality. Science rejects the ontology of mathematics because it privileges sensing over intuition. If science were an intuitive subject, step one of its method would be, intuit. You wouldn't perceive via your senses, but via your intuition. Jung wrote, everything, whether outer or inner objects or their relationships, can be the focus of this perception, intuition. The peculiarity of intuition is that it is neither sense perception, nor feeling, nor intellectual inference, although it may also appear in these forms. Intuition is multifaceted. For the likes of Plato and Plotinus, it was the supreme intellectual activity. Peter Dariush wrote, Plato is the heir of the Parmenidean doctrinal tradition of being and cognition. According to him, intuition is the immediate perceiving of ideas. This may be supernatural intuition, or rational intuition. The first is perceiving ideas seen before birth, the second is recollection of knowledge or cognition of ideas in the mind. The aim of intuitive knowledge is the definition of the essence. Plotinus is the successor to Plato's theory of supernatural intuition. Just as the senses perceive percepts, intellectual intuition perceives concepts, the essence of things rather than their mere appearance. For most people, intuition is about instant impressions and feelings concerning people, events and situations. It can also be a paranormal form of sense perception where you observe situations, as if with your physical senses, but in fact far out of the range of your physical senses. You are instead using your mental senses, the same ones you use in dreams, out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences.